This podcast is intended for a mature audience over 19 years of age and is provided on an educational and informational basis. Any material presented is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as a substitute for professional medical advice or as an endorsement or medical claim by Pattison Media, Everything Podcast, or Ripco.pro.
Smoking joints and baking brownies. Setting some pot on fire and inhaling it or baking it into some kind of food. That's pretty much how we used to consume cannabis.
Doing research on an illegal plant was difficult. New product development? Pretty much impossible.
Now though, if I walk into a cannabis store, there are options. Lots of options. Drinks, oils, topicals, full-spectrum edibles, vapes. That didn't really happen before legalization.
The cannabis space is innovating, with new ways to consume cannabinoids and new active compounds being tried out. So today on the podcast, we're checking out some new products.
And we're investigating how legalization and regulation has changed innovation.
It's had kind of a push-pull effect on innovation. And by that I mean there's a real push on getting everything that would fulfill the regulations. But it puts a little bit of a ceiling on what you might want to try.
We're also hearing from one of the scientists behind cannabis innovations.
I'm a nuclear physicist. My PhD is in applied nuclear physics. I worked for 5 years in this space. And at some point I decided that to do well is not enough. You have to do good, and then you do well.
I'm Don Schaefer.
I'm Ross Rebliati. This is the podcast.
And here's the Pot News with Jay Coburn.
Regulators in California have revoked the license of a cannabis testing lab. The lab is accused of tampering with equipment and altering test results so that cannabis allegedly contaminated with mold or pesticides still received a pass. California Cannabis Testing Labs was first discovered to have engaged in activity that poses a threat to public health by the State Department of Cannabis Control in February 2022, according to documents obtained by MJ Biz Daily. They've also been accused of retesting samples to produce false and artificially inflated levels of THC. That's something we reported on in the previous episode of the podcast. The Ontario Cannabis Store is planning to begin reducing the number of products it carries in its warehouse by several thousand in the coming year and a half. The OCS is Ontario's provincial buyer and Canada's largest cannabis market. The OCS says it's moving to create a more efficient supply chain amid an oversupply of product. They're starting the process in September. And Albertans can now use Uber Eats to order cannabis. Alberta is the third province to implement the system after BC in 2023, and before that Ontario in 2022. Alberta Gaming, Liquor and Cannabis says this is legal because the store still has to deliver the cannabis themselves rather than regular Uber drivers. Customers must also verify their age from the app and show their ID to the delivery driver. That's the Hot News. I'm Jay Coburn.
Thanks, Jay. So, how do you innovate with a product that's thousands of years old and heavily regulated? Who can tell us about that?
I think I know a guy.
I'm currently heavily involved in the cannabis space, making innovative products. I've worked in the legal space since 2013. I started as a QAP, quality assurance person, for Sundial Growers. Back when Sundial Growers was 3 people on a good day. I went off and did some work with Broken Coast, with Cake and Caviar over at Habitat. I work with Herbal Dispatch over in Richmond, BC. Super company. And then before all this happened, I was vice president of chemistry at Agate Laboratories, which is Canada's biggest lab. So I've got a long science pedigree and entrepreneurship, and I like cannabis, and I like cannabis products.
I've worked with Sean a bunch. He really knows his stuff about the science of cannabis and about bringing new products to the market. He's the founder of Ripco Processing, and we actually work together on my own brand of cannabis, Nagano Gold.
You know, a lot of people will have a beer on the weekend. They'll maybe have more than one beer on the weekend. I find 2 things happen if I do that. I'm groggy and then I get fat. And neither one of those things are good with me. So I do use cannabis. I don't like to smoke necessarily, although that's one of my favorite ways, but I like to cut down on the smoking. I like to stay as clean as possible. And I suppose in that way it's relaxation.
But we're not talking to Sean about good old-fashioned flower today. Ripco is behind a bunch of new ways to get your THC and CBD dose. So I want to find out what it's like bringing new products to the market. I began by asking him how legalization has affected innovation in the cannabis space. So let's move on to the exciting stuff now. New products, new science, new innovations. Legalization happened 6 years ago now. So how has that affected the development of the new products since then?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's had kind of a push-pull effect on innovation. By that, I mean, there's a real push on getting everything that would fulfill the regulation. Different types of gummies. How do we really fill what the regulations are looking for? Concentrates really came into their own during that period as well. And that's moved into infused products, a lot of infused joints, for example, fastest growing segment in the market. So the regulation helped push the innovation into certain directions. The flip side of it is, and this will happen in any regulated space because you're, again, trying to mitigate all the risk, but it puts a little bit of a ceiling on what you might want to try. If we have to have dosages for edibles, in other words, understanding that an edible is 10 milligrams, 5 milligrams, whatever it is, super important. Everybody can buy into that. But why would you need to understand the exact dosage in a smokable product when it's a self-titrating, meaning that you know how much you're consuming as you consume it generally?
Right.
Cannabis accessories are another area where innovation, I think, is a little bit stifled by what the regulations will allow you to produce. That one's a little bit more complicated, but there's been some nice devices that I've seen that just won't work with the current regulations, but they really should. They're fantastic devices. And, not fault the regulator. It's just these things need to grow. And as long as they continue to be responsive, maybe a little faster, please, but continue to be responsive to what the industry is facing and what the consumers want at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Consumers want the innovation.
Yeah, they want the innovation. And a lot of times the innovation comes before the regulations. And that's where we're hitting the wall there. We'll ask about your own products in a little bit, Sean. But before we do, who do you look to in this industry for innovation? Who is really blazing a trail when it comes to new types of cannabis products?
For a while, it was definitely Israel and a lot of the knowledge coming out of Israel. And Israel has a long tradition since Dr. Meshulam.
Cannabis is very promising, but should be based on good science.
He discovered what the structure of this molecule that was so much fun. He discovered what that was. And sure enough, it was this compound called THC. It did it in 1965. That innovation really stuck in Israel, and a lot of interesting products came out during that 2014 to 2020 period. Different types of vaporizers, herbal vaporizers, not smoking, just vaporizing off the cannabinoid, including THC and terpenes, etc. With different types of vape cartridges and dosage metering on cartridges and that sort of thing, more from the medical market. A lot of nano products, for those that aren't familiar, is really taking the extracts of cannabis, which don't like water. Put them in water, they float, they just don't like water. If you nanoize them, it makes it so it actually mixes in water. People will say water soluble, and maybe that's a good way to picture it. It's not exactly correct, but that's kind of what it does, and then it makes it quicker because it will actually absorb quickly under the tongue and the buccal cavities to bypass the liver. Why would you want to do that? Bypass the liver. Because then you get the delta-9, which is the fun molecule.
Delta-9, I like it.
Fast acting, right? And then the nano products, you find them in drinks. There's strips that are like breath strips that go on the tongue.
Right.
And they're fast acting. So Israel, I've looked to, and then we started to see things like diamonds and sauce come out of Colorado and California back in the day. So that's where you're dealing with pure THCA and then terps. So you get these little diamonds of THCA and then the terp sauce. Really interesting ways of consuming cannabis there. So I guess I don't look to any producer necessarily for innovation. It's, what's the cannabis community doing and where's the knowledge coming from and who's really trying to make products that deliver to the consumer.
What about products you've been involved in? What new stuff is out there or is coming down the pipeline that you're currently got your hands on?
capsules and coming up with a few different ways of making proper cannabis capsules with a full entourage effect. That is, people don't think about that entourage and something you're consuming in that way. We actually partnered with Broken Coast and generated a capsule program for them. Other products, growing cannabis using aquaponics was a big one. That's where we grow coho salmon and then take the nutrients into a digestion system, take those nutrients over to a different water system and grow ridiculously good cannabis. That was one of the best innovations for sure. And that continues under the Cake and Caviar brand. A really amazing cannabis. More recently, moving into, I mentioned concentrates and putting concentrates into pre-rolls, and the consumer is really grabbing that fastest growing segment. So the problem though is the performance of the pre-roll is okay. It'd be funny, like smokers, you'd imagine smokers buying a pack of smokes and they light one up and it runs all down the end of the tobacco folder. Why do we accept that in pre-roll?
Why is that acceptable?
Yeah, I buy it so I don't have to roll it myself, if I'm being lazy, and I can roll one that burns well. And then from the mass production side, we understand the problems. So what I've been working on is actually a device that comes from Israel, patent from Israel, that I have brought into Canada for the Canadian rights, that actually goes inside the pre-roll. And it's a core inside the pre-roll that helps it burn beautifully. No canoeing, there's no runaway. Two people can share a joint for 20 minutes. And the beautiful part of it is you also deliver another 50 milligrams of cannabinoids. And so, for example, THCA. So 50 milligrams of THCA in a little stick.
So it infuses the joint, but at the same time, it kind of slows the burn down and increases the quality of the joint itself.
Yep.
Just in the way it works. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. Like a person can take a pull off of the joint, and it doesn't even look like they're taking a pull, and yet they do the exhale, and it's clouds and clouds. It's like, how is that working? It's just so wild. A really nice device.
What do you call it?
Called Stick It. That's what you do. You stick it in the joint. Comes in a couple of different formats. There's the Stick It Classic, which is made from a more hemp product. Really woody. People really like how it delivers a particular type of flavor, and it does all the performance things we just talked about. And then there's the Black Diamond, which is actually a charcoal-based stick with solid integrity. Still lots of tricks to do what I just said. And then that's infused, and it's super clean. Performs pretty much exactly the same way. Looks cool, and is really high performing.
Was it very difficult to bring this product to the Canadian market?
It's different, and I think wrapping your head around the fact that it's a concentrate is a little bit interesting. I had to come to that realization myself. And then, of course, working with Health Canada, they were interested in the dosage per stick. Whereas with most concentrates, you're not, could you imagine having a gram of THCA diamonds, little rocks and a thing, different sizes, and you have to know the weight of each one of them? It doesn't make any sense. And yet, when I buy 10 sticks, I want to know how much per stick, but it's more, what's the concentration, right? How many milligrams per gram am I delivering?
We've talked about testing and the QA process for cannabis flower, but what's that process like for an entirely new product? Is that a bigger hurdle?
That's huge, because you have to design the standard operating procedure, and that needs to produce that repeatability that we talked about.
Right. So
you got to fit within your own organization's quality management system. It's fitting inside the Health Canada regulations, which fit inside the ISO regulations, etc. Right. So you have to be mindful of all this while you build your procedure. And then for most products, you also have to assess every point of risk and then elucidate, well, what if this risk happened? What if a stick dropped on the floor and somebody picked it up and put it in, right?
Right.
How do you avoid that particular risk? How do you mitigate all those risks? So that's called a PCP. So those need to be designed, and then for some things you have to then go ahead and validate. You have to work with the lab. You make sure that for a new product like the stick, you have to work with them to make sure that the testing that's coming back is making sense, because it's a whole new animal for them. You send them a stick, they're like, well, what is that? What did you just send me? What do we do with that? Yeah.
So after Stick It, what's next for Ripco?
I talked a little bit earlier about the thin films. It's like a breath strip. You put on your tongue, dissolves within 5 seconds, and delivers nanoized cannabinoids in different formulations. So THC, other CBD combinations, can also do terpenes. That's coming. So we've developed the formulation for that. It's a tricky one. It's got to be strong, but dissolve really fast.
From a market perspective, how hard is it to bring something totally new to cannabis consumers?
It'd be pretty difficult unless you've got something that people right away understand and know what to do with it. The market, I think, is pretty accepting. I think a lot of cannabis users are used to trying new things.
That was Sean Ripley, founder of Ripco and science and business advisor to a bunch of cannabis companies, including Habitat, Herbal Dispatch, and Broken Coast. You can find Ripco's products, including Stick It, at ripco.pro.
You heard Sean mention one of his new products there, Stick It. We wanted to find out more about that, so we got in touch with the scientist behind it, Dr. Asher Holzer.
My PhD is in applied nuclear physics. I worked for 5 years in this space. And at some point, I decided that to do well is not enough. You have to do good, and then you do well.
Dr. Holzer is from Israel, which maybe shouldn't be so surprising considering Sean said that's where so much cannabis research comes from. But pot's still illegal there.
Of course, everybody smokes. The police don't run after the smoker. They try to nail down the dealers.
So the people who do smoke weed there don't necessarily do it out in the open, which might explain the origin story of Dr. Holzer's Stick It.
Everything started when I was in New York. I was standing outside of the Chrysler building with my lawyer over there. After we took a very successful public offering, it was January, it was snowing outside, and he couldn't smoke inside, so we went outside into a shade for the building. And it was very uncomfortable for him, to roll and to smoke. And then a policeman was over there and he was a little bit uncomfortable. So at that point I thought, why to take a good Marlboro to turn it out and to crush some cannabis and remix it and basically prepare a joint. And I thought it might be a good idea to basically develop a stick that you can stick into any kind of cigarette, a split of a second, and turn your cigarette to be a joint. And this is what I did.
Us Canadians might not be into mixing tobacco and weed so much, but in Europe and Israel, that's way more normal. But like Sean said earlier, that's not how we're marketing it here. It's more about infusing existing pre-rolls or adding a little something extra to your own roll to slow the burn down and get an extra bit of a buzz.
And Dr. Holzer says there's another advantage: consistency.
We prepare the stick from scratch, from isolates and disolates of the different materials. We mix it together, we cast it, we make the stick. And that gives us quite an advantage because, first of all, we know exactly what we put inside. One of the problems of cannabis is that you can never know what you're smoking. You buy a flower, and maybe it's good, maybe not, because it's very difficult to reproduce again and again the same quality of flowers. It's a botanical problem that everybody has, like, what if you buy a watermelon? Sometimes it's sweet, sometimes not, sometimes it's, a different taste. We know exactly what we put inside. So the user is getting the very same smoking experience again and again and again. The nice thing about it is, if you like it once, you're going to like it again.
It's really cool to hear Dr. Holzer talk about something that feels really unscientific, getting high in such a scientific way. I'm not a drinker anymore, so I love the next couple of products he's come up with. They mean I could easily sit in a bar with friends or drinking, order a soda or a coffee, and chill out with my buddies in my own way.
We do have 2 more products coming into the market very soon. One of them is really the end of the R&D. One of them is a straw that has a cartridge inside that contain CBD, THC, whatever you like. Let's say if you want to drink whiskey, pina colada or something, and you zip it through a straw, you get it in. The nice thing about it that we found a solution to the taste. So you don't feel any taste. Now keep in mind, but other technologies, they try to mask the taste. Let's say to put a lot of sugar. So you basically become very sweet. Maybe you don't feel so much the bitter taste of the THC. But if you drink whiskey, you don't want to sweet whiskey. We found a very unique patented technology basically to make it happen. And the trick that we have is that basically when you drink, let's say sugar, you taste it on a molecular level. It hits your tongue and this is where you feel the taste. But if you have a little bit larger particles, they don't have much of a surface, they just go through.
Dr. Holzer is also working on a spoon to mix coffee, which infuses the drink as you stir it.
So Dr. Holzer is an innovator in the cannabis space, and he's doing it from a country where cannabis is still illegal.
It's a real challenge. First of all, there are difficulties to ship it from one place to another. So let's say in the States, in each state, we have to find a local manufacturer and a local distributor because we cannot cross the state line. So what we're doing right now, we're looking for potential partners in different states, in the USA, that have a manufacturing license and distribution license, so we can use their facility basically, and together maybe build some kind of a joint venture or any kind of business arrangement where we can sell it in different states that they are allowed over there. Of course, we have a facility in Canada that we can sell it to the Canadian market, and we are working in some other countries where it is allowed. Keep in mind that we are recreational, we are not medical. Although, if you think about it, it can be an excellent medical grade type of product because it is very reproducible and we know exactly what we are delivering. However, we don't want to do in the medical business because it's a different culture of a company if you do recreational and if you do medical. So we are looking for some potential partner to pick it up and to do the medical side of it.
The Canadian market is pretty well covered by Sean and Ribco, but I know we have a bunch of cannabis industry listeners from outside Canada. So he asked Dr. Holzer what those folks should know if they're interested in partnering.
We are looking for commercialization. So I would like to find as many potential partners in different places. And my message is that if anybody would like to take part of this venture, and he has the facility of manufacturing license, a distribution license, and he likes the spirit of the business, we are open for a dialogue. We are looking for good partners. We're planning to grow pretty fast. If I have to look in my crystal ball, for every stick that I can sell, I bet Philip Morris can sell many more. So our partners should be either cigarette manufacturers and distributors or cannabis manufacturers and distributors. Both of them are most welcome to contact me and to go to our website www.stickit-labs.com.
That was Dr. Asher Holzer, a cannabis scientist and creator of Stickit.
If you're in the mood for trying something new after all the innovation in this episode, our producer and reporter Jay Coburn has been testing out a couple of new products that are available in provincially supplied stores right now.
So the products I've enjoyed the most lately have been kind of old school in style, but new in their execution. I'm going to start with Cake and Caviar. They're a brand of cannabis from BC that we kind of love already here on the podcast. I heard about them because we actually interviewed Kayla Mann, their chief financial officer, in the last episode.
We grow organic coho salmon as well as cannabis in the same system. So we've built a technology that allows that symbiotic ecosystem to happen, and we're really just emulating nature to create two super awesome products.
We're going to do more on them in the future, so I don't want to go over too much of the process of aquaponics, but essentially it's a circular system that uses the same water and the salmon's natural fertilizer, let's call it, to grow cannabis. Cake and Caviar grow their cannabis in this way, which is kind of new and exciting, to me at least. I'm a bit of an eco-warrior at heart. I ride my bike everywhere, you know, I'm that kind of hippie wannabe. So that really appealed to me. But I also wanted to know if that actually genuinely makes for better cannabis, or if it's just a bit of earth-friendly marketing. So I checked if their stuff was on sale in Ontario, and it is. I picked up an eighth of the hybrid Blueberry Yum Yum and an eighth of the Sativa Waffle Bites. Now, I'm not a big sativa guy, but I tried the waffle bites. It was good, but not really my thing. Like I said, not a sativa guy. But if you are a sativa smoker, then I'd recommend it, because my experience with the hybrid, the blueberry yum yum, was just awesome. It tastes like blueberries. I know everyone claims their weed tastes like lemon or mango or whatever fruit they want to put on the label, but I promise you this one does actually taste like blueberries. I eat blueberries and yogurt every morning for breakfast. I love blueberries, so I was super happy. But the taste wasn't the best part. I lay on my couch watching Star Trek and I just felt like the couch was giving me a big hug. It wasn't a proper couch lock, it was just a really great body high. I was grinning the whole time. But this wasn't like a hazy high either. I actually felt pretty clear-headed. I tried both the blueberry yum yum and the waffle bites in joints, but I bet they'd be good in a flower vape too. Just delicious flavors, delicious highs.
Okay, so aquaponic weed from Cake and Caviar is your first recommendation. What else do you have for us?
Yeah, next up, I have another new take on an old product, El Bluntito, which as an occasional Spanish speaker, I can tell you that El Bluntito is Spanish for the little blunt. Blunts aren't exactly anything new. People have been wrapping cannabis in tobacco leaves like cigars for longer than I could find out in my research, but a really long time. But here's one place where I think regulation has actually made for a product that I personally enjoy more, because El Bluntito is wrapped in hemp, not tobacco, and it really does look like a proper cigar. Picture a fat little Cuban, maybe about the length of a thumb and a half, 1.5 thumbs. That's my measurement. Now, I don't smoke tobacco anymore, but I did really enjoy cigars when I did. I just don't want tobacco near my mouth and lungs anymore. It's not for me, so having this wrapped in hemp, which like the regulations need you to do, actually makes this a better product for me. And it kind of gives it this rich, woody flavor that I really enjoy. Honestly, it's dangerous because there's quite a lot of weed in here, 0.75 grams. And this one here is 28% THC. So I do kind of end up knocking myself out. But like a cigar, you put it out, try a bit later. You know, you don't have to smoke the whole thing at once. You would probably knock yourself out if you did. Hidden in the end is a glass filter tip as well, which is actually a nice touch. No wasted weed, no soggy end like you get on tobacco cigars. The brand is El Blunto, the one I've been smoking is El Bluntito. It's around the $15 mark, so it's pricier than your average pre-roll, but definitely worth it for a treat now and then, in my opinion. They also have an infused 2-gram blunt that clocks in around 40% THC. Honestly, way too strong for me. I'm sure someone out there is into that though, so if you are, maybe give that one a go. I haven't tried it. Bit scared of the 40% THC mark. Both products are hand-rolled too, which I think most blunts are, but it's still a nice touch.
What about for non-smokers? Any edibles or topicals?
Yeah, so I'm actually a big fan of cannabis drinks. It just feels like a very social and manageable way to consume if you're around people who are more into their booze. And I came across this company called Ricci or Ricci. I think it's meant to be Ricci, probably the Italian, R-I-C-C-I. They call their products Italian-style beverages. But it's clearly supposed to be cannabis wine. They just can't say that because of regulations around cannabis and alcohol. There's 10 milligrams of THC and CBD in a bottle. So if you share it and you're a seasoned consumer, you're not going to get a huge buzz. But it is a pretty novel thing, and I just really like the idea of cannabis wine. Good way to share a little THC, or at least join in with your friends if you're not going to drink. Now, it's not going to win flavor awards, but it does taste pretty decent. I'm not exactly a sommelier, but if you had to describe it, I'd say the red I tried is a bit like a $20 Cabernet Sauvignon, quite fruity but with a dry finish. So if you're going to a party with people who are drinking and you want to bring a bottle without having to drink alcohol yourself, I think this is an awesome way to partake.
Okay, thanks, Jay. Ross, you're not a drinker. What do you make of the Ricci? Would you go for the red or the white?
Probably I would go for the red because I like my steaks and roast beef, so that might pair better with the things that I eat. I wasn't much of a wine drinker in the first place. I usually just had a little bit of red with my meals.
Okay, big thanks to our producer, Jay Coburn there. Before that, you heard from Dr. Asher Holzer. The podcast is an Everything Podcasts production in partnership with Ripco.pro. The opinions expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the views of the podcast team or our partners. This show is intended for a 19-plus audience. Thanks to our host, Ross Rebliati, showrunner Karen Habashi, senior writer Jay Coburn, and sound design by John Massacre. I'm Don Schaefer. Thanks for listening to Podcast, another Everything Podcast production. Visit everythingpodcast.com, a division of Pattison Media. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast.